Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this live call with Management Consulted. My name is Japheth Mast, VP of Marketing and Partnerships here. Just excited to kind of play host as we host a boutique consulting firm, Stax, and you're going to hear all about mid-career opportunities at the firm. You're gonna hear about Stax's special sauce and why, if you fit the requirements, check the boxes, that you should consider applying for a role at Stax. And because good news, the firm is hiring, and we'll get to that here in just a second. While folks are tuning in from Zoom, from LinkedIn Live, from YouTube, and other places, we'd love to hear where you're calling in from. So just let us know, popping in the chat where you're calling in from. We'll give you a shout out here in just a second. Really appreciate you taking an hour out of your Thursday afternoon to spend with us. All right. Well, one of the main reasons that I think y'all joined this call is to learn about jobs. So let me just kick off with those right off the bat. Two roles that Stax is hiring for right now, the manager and senior manager role inside of the US in their US offices here. And you can read the screen for a couple of details about experience, but really encourage you to read through the job description by scanning the QR code here. And in a sec, there will be a link here in the chat where you can see the careers page, check out the roles, read the job description, and uh, start getting your application ready. Last thing I'll call out here is that other roles, right, for like early career for MBAs will open up later this year. So if you don't fit the requirements for the manager or senior manager role, you may for other roles that are coming up at Stack. So stay tuned to the firm's careers page, to their LinkedIn, right? Get on their mailing list so that you're the first to know when out those opportunities are available. Amazing. And look forward to just getting your questions answered about the roles, about the work, etc., at this private equity consulting firm, which you'll hear about in just a sec. If you're preparing your application, whether it's for Stax or another firm, we'd love to kind of come alongside you in the process. We have an incredible expert coaching team, a resume editing team, and coaches who can provide input on your networking strategy for the recruitment process. And we've helped over 15,000 candidates break in through our expert coaching and our programming here. And so, just highlighting a couple of the programs here, I'll just highlight our resume and cover letter edits, as well as our black belt case prep program. We're going to help you optimize your resume, your cover letter for the specific roles, the firms, the industries that you're targeting to give you kind of the best shot and make you look really good. And then black belt, our April cohort is coming up that closes in about a week and a half, and there's just 15 spots left, and that includes the resume edits. It includes 8 or more hours of one-on-one coaching with a former McKinsey, Bain, or BCG coach, as well as just a lot more. So scan the QR code here to get more information on that. There will be links in there here in the chat to learn about that. If you're a student at a partner university, we've got over 130 partner universities. Check out your discounts tab in your management consultant account for a discount. And although Katie Neff is not here with us today, she's here with us in spirit. Katie is your main person to talk to if you're interested in one of these programs. And so there'll be a link in the chat to book a call with a 15-minute call with Katie, just an info call to figure out, which package is right for you, or even to answer the question of, am I a good fit for Stacks or for just consulting in general? Katie is a former BCG consultant, a former Black Belt alum, and she loves answering questions. So book with her just to confirm which package is right for you. Okay, well, I'm gonna take a breath and just quickly introduce what we're gonna do here over the next 55 minutes or so, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague Jenny Ray. So in a minute, we're going to dive into a conversation with Darren from Stax. He's tuning in from the Chicago office. You get to kind of see a little part of the Chicago skyline in his background. And him and Jenny Ray are gonna have just really dynamic conversation. We took your questions and we're asking them of him. And then after kind of a conversation, we're gonna take some of your pre-submitted questions, uh, ask them to Darren, and if there's any time left, we'll do a little bit of live Q&A with those of y'all that are tuning in live. Clear as mud? Cool. Okay. Well, stay tuned to the chat for those links. And without further ado, I'm going to give the floor over to Jenny Ray. Jenny Ray, please take it away.
Japheth, once you give it to me, I'll never give it back. So here we are.
Oh,
Welcome
I know.
everybody to the call. Yeah, you have a decade of experience at this point. Hey, we're so excited to have Darren on. I'm going to start by introducing Darren. Then I've got a series of questions. This is going to flow like a fun conversation. Darren, we're excited that you're here. And then we'll kind of go a little bit live with some of those questions as Japheth mentioned. So Darren Buskirk is a managing director at Stax, specializing in private equity and healthcare strategy. With over a decade of consulting experience, he's led over 100 diligence engagements across provider, HCIT, and payer-focused solutions, advising investors and organizations on commercial strategy and M&A. Before joining Stax, Darren was at McKinsey & Company, supporting its healthcare private equity practice. He began his career in private equity at American Capital and has also held consulting roles at EY Parthenon and Deloitte. Darren holds a BS in finance from the University of Maryland and an MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. Welcome, Darren, to Strategy Simplified and to this recording today. We're excited that you're here.
Thank you, and likewise.
So I mentioned some of the history, the highlights of the history, but let's go one level deeper. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey, right? You worked at these other top firms, private equity, McKinsey. Why Stax? Why was that the right next step of your career?
Yes, I mean, I had worked as you mentioned at a few very large firms, and I think as I progressed in my career, I was ready for something different, and maybe something smaller where my individual contributions would make more of an impact. And I think for me too, later in my career, I really realized the importance of culture and how important that is on a day in day out basis. And so that was really important to me too, as I was having conversations with various employers. I ended up meeting our CEO Jason Traxler and our global practice leader Paul Edwards through a recruiter, and I think just talking to them, we clicked pretty quickly. I bought into their vision, what they were trying to do, what my role would be here within Chicago as kind of an office leader, as well as what they were trying to do with healthcare and other verticals. And it was just a click, and it felt right. And then as I just continued to meet other people, that sentiment carried on, and it just felt really natural for me to join Stax.
I love it. Can you start us back even further? Why the heck consulting and private equity? This is a very interesting kind of combo specialty that you had. And then as we're kind of talking about that, why did each of those roles kind of you mentioned culture being differentiated at Stax, but what about the work? What is a little different about what you're doing now at Stax from the other experiences as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's different about Stacks is, so I'll answer your first question first. Why consulting? Why private equity? So coming out of business school, I'm not sure that I knew what I really wanted to do, and I think consulting is kind of an extension of business school where you can continue to dabble in various industries, functional areas, all that good stuff. And I think the typical plan for most people coming out of business school is, hey, I'm going to make it here 2 years. I'm going to get promoted to manager, and then I'm going to go do something in corporate. I think I might have missed the boat on that because I'm like 12, 13 years removed, and I'm still here. But I think
You just have to find the door, Darren. You
that's
just
right.
haven't found the door yet.
That's
Yeah.
right. So I started consulting in more of that generalist mold, and was doing things around strategy, transformation, operations, and I liked it, but I was trying to always figure out, okay, what's next. And then that was at Deloitte, and then I got recruited by Parthenon, and it was a really compelling story because it was a way for me to combine that consulting experience that I had with the private equity experience that I had before business school. So it was like a nice meshing of the two, and it just made sense. And I had always done a lot of healthcare work in the past, and I felt like at that time that I had enough reps where I felt comfortable, and I knew I kind of wanted to pursue that path. So um, that's kind of what led me to where I am today. And I think to answer your question around how Stax is different from other firms and other consulting experiences, I think a couple of things. One is we're a very flat organization. All of our people are accessible from the top down. Our junior people have a lot of have a seat at the table, and they're expected to contribute their thoughts during internal working sessions and other interactions with the team. It's not just source these calls for us or take notes. I think they're genuinely contributing to the thoughts and the work that goes out to our clients. Um, I also think we're very collegial, and we very much have a community in each of our local offices. So we have in-office days. Generally, everyone is in the office at least 3 days a week, and for me, I think that's really critical for the development of our people when you're not virtual and when you're in person. And the way that plays out is someone sitting next to you can say like, "Hey, how do I do this survey? What are the best ways that you've thought about this problem or whatever else it might be?" And you don't have to schedule a Zoom meeting to do that, right? You can just tap them on the shoulder. And then I think it's also important for just the health of our culture and organization, and beyond just being in the office together, we're doing a lot outside the office. We're going to Cubs games, we're going to dinners. We just did an event a couple weeks ago where we did floor arrangements as a group. So I think those types of things continue to happen, and just kind of perpetuate that collegial atmosphere. And I think the last thing is, it ties into that too, is that we don't travel a lot. And I think that's very different from larger firms where you're on the road Monday to Thursday. I mean, when I first started in consulting, I was going to Hartford, Connecticut every week for months on end, Monday to Thursday, and people were only in the office on Fridays if they were at all. And it's just very different here.
I love it. Well, this may be a little bit belated because we've already kind of cracked this a little bit, but can you just introduce Stax, as if we were on a plane settling in and I said, what do you do and who do you work for? Can you kind of just give me a little bit about the work, the value proposition for clients, and how y'all are building the business right now?
Yeah, I mean, so the firm has actually been around for 30 years. Historically, we've been a founder-owned and founder-run business with a smaller set of loyal customers that uses consistently, and that we had a lot of success with. We've always been focused on the private equity sector. That hasn't really changed. What did change was in the fall of 2021, we ourselves got bought by private equity. And as part of that, they strategically invested in us to do, what I consider really two main things. One is to verticalize our offering. So what that means is, myself in healthcare as an example, we hired someone in technology and software that's a leader in the space. We have a business services leader. We have leaders across all these different verticals now that have really deep expertise that we can go to market to with our clients. And that's how they organize themselves, is they organize themselves by vertical. So you kind of have to be able to do that in market today. And then what else? Another thing that we did was we started to build out the matrix. So if you think of one side or axis of that matrix of being the verticalization, the other piece is our offerings. So we also migrated to building out a value creation practice to complement our commercial due diligence practice. And what they're doing is a lot more strategic work, generally still within private equity and for their portfolio companies, but we're also doing some work with corporates as well.
I love it. Well, Let's talk a little bit about this PEO focused work. When I went to Bain, they said, "Hey, you can do this rotation through the PEG practice," and I thought, "Oh, that sounds interesting." But honestly, I couldn't have told you exactly what it was, what we were doing, how long it was going to be, what the mix of work was going to be. So I'm hoping you can kind of go one level deeper on the work, maybe by highlighting 1 to 3 kinds of projects and then the pace of them, right? So, when do you get the project? How fast does it have to happen? Are these iBanking hours? Are these consulting hours? Are they somewhere in between? Right. Just tell us a little bit about the demands and the pace of what the kind of, month to month, day to day looks like for a PE project.
Yeah, I mean, generally the sales lead times are pretty short. And it's probably a week and a week and a half at most for a buy side. And then, if we're supporting a sell side transaction where we're working with investment bankers and management to build out a market study there, those can be a little longer in terms of the sales cycle. But generally speaking, our engagements are faster paced. Our clients have bid deadlines that they're working towards, and what that lends itself to is pretty quick engagement. So our typical buy side engagement, for example, is about 3 weeks in duration. And for me personally, I like that fast pace because it's energizing to me, and it also allows me to kind of hit the reset button every 3 weeks. So on any given week, I could be working on a physical therapy project, and then the next week, like going super deep into uh, electronic medical records and on the healthcare and IT side of things. And no engagement is really the same. And even being in the space for over a decade, I'm constantly learning new things every day.
I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about just Stax and other major consulting firms because Stax, we would consider Stax a boutique with more of a kind of a focus on a specific client type and a project type, not based on size necessarily, but just specialization. So, can you talk about how specialization works at Stax, how mobility works between offices or projects, how promotions work? Just talk a little bit about kind of the life cycle of a consultant and a couple of those attributes that especially might be different than some of the standard consulting firms.
Yeah. So I mean, I I don't think specialization really is expected or occurs until our people get to the associate director level, which is kind of two levels removed from managing director. And at that point, you're kind of expected to have a little bit of expertise in 1 or 2 areas. And as part of that, you're joining sales pitches and you're contributing from a content perspective. But I don't really think that's expected or happens more until that AD level. We're a small firm, so it's not hard to stand out if you're a top performer. And this isn't a situation where you're going to get lost in the numbers by any stretch. And we're also very much a meritocracy, so we promote people when we think they're ready, which I think is a little different compared to larger firms where it tends to be more tenure or time based. So in those environments, you may see, well, you're doing well, but generally you're not up for promotion until 2 years. That doesn't really happen here. Those conversations are fluid and happen every evaluation cycle in terms of, is this person ready? Is this person performing at the next level? All those things.
Let's talk about that one in particular. I had a specific moment in Bade that I'm thinking about where it felt like they kind of slow played some of the feedback and it felt like it was stifling my acceleration through the firm. So instead of just kind of telling me when it was, they held it until an evaluation cycle. So how often is an evaluation cycle? And do you have a story of somebody who kind of just blew through a few of them, right? Who came in and you were just like, well, and maybe this is you too, Darren, right? But kind of started it somewhere and just it was way faster than they would have been in somewhere else. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of a bit more clarity on that? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so to answer the evaluation question, we do them twice a year formally as a entire organization, and those happen in the summer and again in the winter. And as part of those, that's when you can get promoted. That's when you're eligible for a promotion. And then I think outside of that, it is Sorry, could you repeat that last part of the
The,
question?
the the second part was just like I'm imagining like a wonderkind, right? Who's
Right.
kind of like
Yes.
who
Yeah.
comes in
Yeah.
and the standard process at McKinsey would be 2 to 3 years between cycles, and this person like every 6 months went through 2 promotions, and
Yep.
so I don't when you say faster or different, I actually don't know how radical it is, but I wondered if you could just kind of tell a story of somebody who was on an accelerated pathway. I think that for the right people, for the people that y'all are looking to attract, for ambitious people,
Right.
that's appealing. It would just be nice to add some color to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we certainly have people that will elevate to the manager role or the senior manager role, for example, in a year and not 2 years. And again, I think 2 years generally at a level is kind of standard as you're
Yeah.
progressing through. It may slow down as you get to MD partner, whatever it is. But where I have seen success, and an anecdote that I'll give you of someone that looks like that is, is someone that has consistently performed. I think has consistently demonstrated intellectual curiosity. That is a team player, and that I think what really starts to differentiate people when you get to like the senior consultant manager type level is the guessing of what's next, right? Of okay, I can anticipate that the client or the director or MD is going to ask this question, so I'm proactively going to address that versus acting more retroactively and responding to direction and I need you to do XYZ, and being very thoughtful in that. I think is are some of the bigger differentiators that we see of those people that tend to elevate quicker.
I love it. Also, just for everyone's clarity, you mentioned that the associate director is 2 steps kind of under managing director. I know a lot of the positions y'all are hiring for manager, senior manager positions. How far is it from those senior manager positions? Can you go the other direction for us?
Yeah, so I mean it goes. I'll start at associate consultant. So we go associate consultant, consultant, senior consultant, manager, senior manager, associate director, director, and managing director.
Darren, when y'all sell, one of my missions in life is to have conforming titles at firms,
I
because
know.
banks somehow figured this out and consulting firms cannot get their act together. So when you sell and you're hanging out, in the Hamptons or upstate at your lake house somewhere, I want to get together. This is my mission. I think you can help me with this.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a vice president, a senior manager, a director, and I completely agree with you. There needs to be some uniformity there.
I love it. Good. Yeah. One of the questions that came up in our call on Tuesday was like, is it okay for you to take a X position if you were at a manager position? And I said, it depends on whether you managed anybody or not, right? Because even in industry, there's this like idea of being a manager is just a tenure thing. It's not necessarily what you're actually doing.
Right.
Total tangent, so we can keep going back to talking about Stax. But anyhow, I think our real focus here is going to shift to mid-career professionals, kind of in light of what I was just talking about. This is a lot of the conversation, the light that I think you can bring here is just around why somebody should come to Stax, maybe from another consulting role or maybe from an industry role, and why that like mid moment inside your career is vital, and why Stax is the right place to do that. So, what are a couple of reasons, 2 or 3, why Stax is an attractive option for a mid-career professional specifically?
Yes, I mean, I mentioned the one, I think the meritocracy piece is big, and it allows for rapid mobility if you are a top performer. I think a very obvious one too is that, you get a chance here to participate in the building of something. We're smaller, but in a rapid growth phase. And, to me, that's pretty exciting. We get to basically mold what the organization looks like, right? So, for me personally, that's, I've had a hand in recruiting and how we think about recruiting, how we think about project economics, and how we should be considering a project over another project and kind of making those decisions. And there's really anything that you could think of, whether it's, the talent piece, the office culture piece, the financial side of how we, account for our P&L, like there's an opportunity there for you to mold and participate in that. Whereas, you can imagine at any other organization that's a lot larger than us, that's already rigid. Those are set in stone. And I think the other thing that I would mention too is that we alluded to this a little bit earlier too, but you get to constantly explore different industries, right? So if you're in that mid-career stage like I was, where you don't know what you want to do next, or you don't know what industry you want to play in, you're going to get 15, 20 reps across industries in a given year, which is a ton of exposure in a very condensed timeline.
I love it. I know that the goal isn't for people to leave Stax, but does it change where you might go also having an experience like the ones that you're offering?
Yeah, I mean, I think we we put people into private equity roles, and then we also put people into a lot of strategy roles. So for example, I actually had coffee today with one of our employees that went to a PE-owned chain of veterinary clinics, and he's now owning, I think, the P&L of 20 to 30 different vet boxes. So it was really great to hear how he's been able to meld that strategy experience that he got here with now P&L ownership at a different place. So I think it's really an accelerator for people, even if they don't want to stay in consulting long term.
Love it. Well, let's just talk a little bit about who fits, right? Degrees, experience, brand name, no brand name, skills that people are bringing, right? Tell us a little bit about what some of the parameters are that really make for a successful hire for y'all.
I mean, I don't think there's any gating degree requirements. So, you don't have to have an MBA, for example, to come in at the mid level. I think what is important is that piece I talked about earlier, that you're intellectually curious, and you're constantly questioning the state of whatever it is we're looking at, or whatever you heard on a call. I think it's also good for someone that thrives in a fast-paced environment and kind of feeds off of that. And then the third element is, I think you've got to be a team player. Everything we do is in teams, and you're always part of a team. So if you're collaborative, it's going to be that much easier for you.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about who's not a great fit. I'm sure we've been in those interviews, right? where somebody self-describes in one way, but you can kind of see maybe that they're not, or they ask a question and you think that was not the right question because you didn't get the culture. What qualities, work styles, et cetera. What are some things that just really don't align? Either people that you didn't hire or people that you did and regretted it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have specific anecdotes there, per se, but I think there are some common themes. So, if you want to be in a predictable role where, say you work in accounting at a corporation, you can kind of look out over the course of the next year and pretty much guess what your day to day is going to look like and what you're going to be working on. And if you value that predictability, stability in what your day in and day out look like that's probably not going to be a good fit for us, where, like I said, we're constantly hitting refresh and looking at something new. We also don't do a lot of longer term projects. So, it can be hard to forge deep relationships with clients when we're not on site with them, for example, 6 months out of the year. We're hybrid.
You're not in Hartford, Connecticut, baby.
Right, exactly.
Or Stanford. Did you say Hartford or Stanford?
Hartford.
Yeah, okay.
Hartford. And also, like, those that don't like working in ambiguous situations where, there's a little bit of, hey, you got to figure this out and put some thought into it, versus a very structured approach. And I know exactly what I have to do to get there.
I love it. Well, let's just I'm going to put you in like uncle mode, cool uncle mode. Give some advice to the cats running around on the call. We know that Stax is growing quickly. We know that you're actively hiring. In the show notes there are links for actual hiring. But advise people, right? What do top candidates do in the networking process? Do they network zero? Do they network some? Could they network too much? And about the application process, right? What are a couple of features that are both do's and don'ts for the application process specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to research whatever company is that you're interviewing with, and you don't have to be able to recite the company's history, but if you know broad strokes about the industries that we serve, for example, and our offerings, it just shows more genuine interest than if you come in and you're kind of guessing at what that might look like. And then I think on the interviewing or on the networking side of the equation is when you're talking to someone, especially early on, it's always good to ask, who else should I talk to? Who else would be a good person for me to talk to about value creation or, software? Because you don't seem to do a lot of that. And being able to have, that handoff just creates more of a network and a support system when it comes down to should this person have an offer.
I love it. I'm thinking of on the don't side. One of my good friends is Keith Bevins over at Bain. He's in the recruiting group, and he specifically put in one of the recent hiring posts, like, please don't reach out and ask us for 15 minutes to talk about the role. Like, the job is pretty clearly defined. And I loved that he did that. It's probably our fault that people are asking for that because we've encouraged people to do that over time. So where do you fall? Team yes, team no? Should people reach out? Do you think it's beneficial both for them and for you, or would you rather have them just apply and go through the process after that?
I think if I had to pick, I would definitely say network, but network strategically, right? Like it's not a boil the ocean exercise. I mentioned who else should I talk to? When you're asking that question, you're asking for that connection, you should have a genuine reason for wanting to do that, not just to check the box, right? So to that extent, I think it is important, and I think it's just going to set you that much more up for success when you get to the interview process and the offer decision process. But I wouldn't overdo it.
Love it. Well, let's talk about interviews. For mid-career professionals, what should candidates expect? Should they expect cases? If so, how many? A digital assessment, etc.
Yeah, so generally, there's going to be a couple of interviews that are more behavioral in nature. So tell us about your experience. Tell us why you're interested in Stax. And the work that we do. There's generally a case study, depending on level. That can be an Excel-based case study, or it can be more of a high-level market sizing study. And that just depends on what level you're getting at. And then kind of as you migrate through that process, then you get to an end point, and there's that decision point.
Love it. Okay, great. And then if you could advise anybody who's kind of in that mid-career professional mode, what's one piece of advice that you wish you would have known when you were considering a career pivot?
Yeah, I
Something you're
mean,
either glad that you did, spontaneously or naturally, or something that you wish you would have done.
right. I mean, I would not lose sight of that. They're interviewing you, but you should also be interviewing them, right? I mean, I talked a lot about culture earlier, and when I was in business school, I always asked, "How's your culture?" But I never really knew what I was asking. I just knew I was supposed to ask that. Whereas now, culture is paramount. So I think, to that point, as you're interviewing them, get a feel for their people and their working styles. And, is this an environment where it seems like I can thrive? And don't just make it a one-way street, right? It should be a fit from both directions.
I love it. Well, at this point, I'm going to take a quick pause so that we can go to some of the questions. Japheth, you've got, I know, pre-submitted questions. I know that we also have some questions that are going to come from the audience here. And then today is opening day Darren. So while we're getting the questions teed up, let's ask probably the most important question of all, which is outside of work. I hear there's this sports theme that we've got going on for you. What is your most memorable sports moment or memory?
Yeah, it's an easy one. So I'm an Eagles football fan, and I've been lucky enough to be able to go to both of the Super Bowls that they won. So I was just in New Orleans for the last Super Bowl, and then in 2018 saw them win their first one in Minnesota. So that easily that easily is the top one.
I love it. Um, are you from near Philly, or how did you become a Phillies fan?
Yeah, so I
Not
was
Phillies, Eagles, but
Phillies, Eagles, Phillies
I'll
too.
ask you the Phillies question in a second.
So my dad was born in Philadelphia. We lived outside of Philadelphia until I was in elementary school. So it was just kind of ingrained into me from my family that you're an Eagles fan and you're a Phillies fan.
I love it. Okay, second most important question, more important to me, Chicago pizza or New York pizza? Explain.
Um, for me, it's probably Chicago. I'm not a native Chicagoan, so I'm not super biased. But I actually like the thin Chicago pizza, not the deep dish, which I think gets all the publicity. But I think I would probably lean Chicago.
Okay, wait, thin Chicago pizza, you're gonna have to explain this. This is a mind bender here.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you would maybe like call tavern style. It's thin, it's round, and it's kind of like cut into squares. And one of the bigger under the radar places here is a place called Pequod's. That is like if you're a local here, it's famous. So I like going there. Not a big Giordano's Limonati's fan. And yeah, I like the thinner crust.
I love it. So you're basically just like, hey, New York pizza, but in Chicago. That's really what you're saying.
Sure.
You can push back, Darren. You can push back. I know you do it 100 times a day on the PE folks that you work with. Well, good. Well, let's go to the questions. We'll have some fun with some of the questions that the audience submitted. So, Japheth, can you kind of launch a couple of those questions Darren's way?
Yeah, let's rock and roll. All right, we'll just start with some questions related to kind of the life and culture at Stacks. So, for a new hire, what do the first 30, 60, 90 days look like at the company? What type of work, projects, etc., are you going to be staffed on? And the results.
I mean, I think so. From day one, you're given two things. One is a mentor who is, kind of responsible for your coaching, your professional development. They're the ones that represent you at performance review meetings, et cetera. And then you're also given a buddy who is generally someone at your level, but they maybe been here for a year or two. And the idea of that person is that they can be a safe space where you go and ask your questions that maybe you wouldn't ask your mentor. So I think what we try to do is provide a lot of support very early on. As far as what your first project looks like, it's you're going to be attached to one of our teams. Um, Generally, it's more of a shadowing role of this is kind of what the role looks like. This is the expectation of what this role looks like, and you might be supporting a work stream or a work stream leader, but you're not necessarily owning it. And then I think, beyond that, in terms of what expectations are for the first 90 days, I don't think it's anything crazy. We just kind of want you to act as a sponge and take it all in and be able to be set up such that when you are given responsibility and ownership of a piece of a project that you're ready to deliver.
I love it. Just be a sponge. Great,
It's
great advice. Great career advice for sure. Amazing. All right. Next up, beyond the PE focus, how does Stacks invest in the professional development? And the specific question is referencing managers to help them remain at the forefront of industry trends and deliver cutting edge insights to clients.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most relevant part of that is you're going to, to be on the cutting edge and to understand industry trends and all that stuff, like that's going to come organically through project work, right? And especially as a manager where you're getting reps across different industries and a lot of reps, I think you're just going to get that on its own. Beyond that, our managers, senior managers tend to work on a lot of thought pieces and white papers that go out into the space. And there's research that's part of that, that's secondary, that can be primary in nature. So that's another avenue. And then I think beyond that, as it relates to professional development, we offer kind of a series of learning. So for at the manager level, it might be a class on how to present better, or it might be a class on project economics and how you monitor them, or team makeup and how to develop the junior people that are on your team, things like that.
I love that. Thanks for the color on that question. All right, next, what do you see as the most critical differentiator between Stax and other top tier private equity consulting firms? Today, you've talked about the kind of smaller size, the culture, et cetera. Is there anything you want to add to this conversation?
No, I mean, I think it's really that. I mean, it's the scale, it's the ability to make an impact at the individual level, and be able to, like I said, build something. And I think too, because we're small enough, there's not a lot of red tape and there's not a lot of politicalness to, our organization and what that looks like. So, to me, those are all pluses.
David, I'll add one from the chat, if that's all right. So,
Yeah.
Darren, we know that the opportunities right now are just in Chicago, Boston, and New York, the manager and senior manager roles that y'all have posted. Can you just talk a little bit about your offices? If somebody's a little bit, location agnostic, how would they understand the differences between those offices?
I mean, they're pretty similar. I mean, we're going to be doing the same type of work cross office, and we staff teams cross office, right? So, I have a team right now. Some are in Chicago, some are in Boston, and I think we have one in New York. So, the work isn't different. I think what might be a little bit different is size and feel. So we started in Boston, grew up in Boston, and that's our biggest office. Chicago's second, I think. We have 30-ish people here on an FTE basis, and then New York's our smaller office. It's probably 15 to 20, I think now. So work is very similar. I think it's just in terms of feel and size, it can be a little bit different across offices.
Awesome. Back to you, Jay.
Beautiful. All right, moving on to a couple of questions around like, does my specific background fit in with Stacks? And the first is, do you need to have a private equity background or have PE specific experience to be considered for a role with Stacks?
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to have I don't think there's a prescribed formula of, you need to have private equity experience and, commercial due diligence, and you've been able to do 20 or 25 of them. I think it's more about, can you connect your prior experience to what we do here in a meaningful way that is a compelling story for us. So I don't think that means you have to have had private equity experience or commercial diligence experience, but maybe you worked in corporate development at another organization and you did a lot of M&A as part of that. Like, that's a great fit for us. It's not one to one. You have to come from exactly what we do in that kind of background.
But it sure doesn't
Jay,
hurt to have M&A, PE, VC, any of that experience, is what I'm hearing.
That certainly won't hurt.
Darren, you're the poster child, right? They need to have PE experience and consulting experience and some healthcare background. Like you had it all.
Yeah, I mean, that just a luck of happenstance. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way the cookie crumbled there.
No, no, that's fine. Japheth, I just want to add one more question from the chat about previous consulting experience versus other corporate functions. Darren, you mentioned corporate development where you're really focused on M&A and deal making. What about other just kind of internal corporate roles? So like life science, healthcare, commercial roles. How would you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so life sciences is a great example. You know, I think to the extent that you have specialization and you can talk about the pharma ecosystem and have experience with things like CROs, CDMOs, those deep dive topics. That type of technical expertise, I think, stands out as an important part of the evaluation process. And that is a great example, life sciences. I think that other people that have more general strategy or general management experience that translates to what it is that again we're doing, because even a commercial due diligence has a lot of strategy in it, even though it's we're generally looking at the same areas and probing on the same areas. There are things like growth opportunities, and if we were to acquire this business, what are the 5 avenues we might be able to explore? And having a strategic background, I think, very much lends itself to that part of the work.
Makes sense. Okay, let's take another question. And oh, by the way, folks, this is kind of open Q&A time. So the chat is open. Please pop in your question and we will answer as many as we can. All right, next question is about advanced degree candidates. Like, do you hire advanced degree candidates? I'm gonna assume the answer is something along the lines of, yeah, it depends. So maybe going a little bit deeper for an advanced degree, let's say it's a non-MBA advanced degree, is there how can they write make themselves relevant to the roles at Stax? How can they make sure their resume is highlighting the most relevant experiences, skills for PE?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're kind of a non-traditional candidate, but there's a story there. I think the best avenue, obviously, there honestly there is to do that networking piece, right? And try to connect with profiles of people that are here that may be interested or kind of look like you, and then kind of build that support system such that we get to the point where it's like, yeah, we're really interested in this person and we want to interview them further.
Amazing. All right. The next question we've handled throughout the call, so we'll skip that and move down to this one around AI. How do you envision the role of AI and automation in PE consulting over the next couple of years, particularly when it comes to the operation due diligence and portfolio value creation?
Yeah. Um, so I like to think our work is still pretty bespoke in terms of what we're doing from a commercial due diligence perspective. I don't think AI is going to ever replace us as consultants. I think rather we will use AI to supplement our processes, right? So, for example, we use AI now when we're doing our primary research interviews. So we'll take a recording of those, we'll load it into like a chat GPT like um, application, and then basically what it will do is create this catalog so that we can then go and search keywords or phrases or quotes that we need, and that alleviates a lot of time and effort on our associates that need to or that needed to historically go through and do a control F or scour through notes, and it just makes our processes more efficient. So it's kind of one way that we're starting to use AI. I still think it's a little bit in its infancy in terms of how it's going to fully impact us, but yeah, that's one example.
Absolutely. Amazing. I appreciate that color there. Okay. All right. Well, we're through the pre-submitted questions, so we're going to exclusively go to the chat for the next couple of minutes. The chat is open. We'll start here with I thought this was a good question from Jason. Jason says, I have a lot of biz dev and sales experience in life sciences slash healthcare tech, but want to transition into consulting. Can someone work on cases but also contribute to bringing in new business?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would love that. Constantly looking for new clients, new opportunities, and as I mentioned earlier, once you kind of get to that manager and above level, I don't think there's sales expectations put on you, but to the extent that you can contribute as part of that sales process, that's a big value add, right? And I mean, if you can strengthen our chance to win, or our aperture of opportunities that are out there in the market, and the at bats that we get, I think those are just those are just positives.
Absolutely. All right. Let me see. Seth is asking, do you have any goals or can you share any goals around headcount specifically for manager, senior manager, as well as post and pre-MBA positions?
Well, that's a tough one. I don't know if I know the answer to that at the top of my head. Um,
No worries. We can follow up lately and get folks an answer
yep.
if the Stax recruiting team is able to.
I mean, Darren, what I'm hearing you say is that the firm's small, so y'all need to be a great fit, right? It's not like you're just looking for warm bodies, but you're looking for people who are going to build the organization as well.
Right.
But we're not talking hundreds. This is like a handful of people
Yeah.
across these.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to be, I don't want to, I didn't want to be beholden to any specific numbers if I put them out there, but I think that we are constantly looking for good people. And what that might mean is there may not be a job posting for it, but if we think you're a really good fit and you're going to be additive to the practice, then we're going to consider you. We're in a situation where we we're often sold out and we don't have capacity. So I think to the extent that again, we find those people that we think are strong fits, we're always opening to hiring to a certain, obviously to a certain extent.
Hey Jay, can I just weigh in a little bit here? We're getting a good number of questions in the chat. It's not that I don't love them. I just want to make sure that y'all like get this. And Darren, you can weigh in if you're in agreement. But I think a lot of you are asking like, is this good experience? Is this experience good experience for what I would do at Stax? And I just want to flip you for a second, just to recommend that like you coming in with the confidence that you have something to bring. Darren's here today to really share about what they're doing and what they're looking for. But part of everything that you do in a firm that is of Stax's size and with the rapid nature of the projects is sales, right? So like you have to think about what is great about your experience, why you can bring it to the table, and why you're going to be a great fit to help build the organization, rather than going in and asking somebody like, "Am I the right fit?" So I know the heart of it is you don't want to spend time networking and applying if they're just going to toss you out because it's not a fit. But I think sometimes we take too like almost too humble of an approach, whereas it's your job to tell your story and to explain how you're intellectually curious you are and how hardworking you are, and the analytical capabilities that you have that you can bring to the table. And Stacks will find the place to fit with you if you are a right fit from that perspective. Darren, am I on the right track there? Because
No,
I
I mean,
I think we could like I think we could spend 10 minutes being like yes, no, yeah, but I think almost everything is probably yes,
I
just depending on how you position it.
I think that's great advice. And I wouldn't want to advocate for like a shotgun approach of what, there's a job opening and this is outside Stacks, this is broad. But what I would do is you're looking at a role, you're interested in it, is kind of think about like, what would my elevator pitch be for this if I had like 2 minutes to pitch myself? And if I can tell a compelling story and I have something to offer, then maybe this is a good fit. If I don't know what that answer is, or I have to have someone tell me, then that's a harder sell, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Jay, I know that there are a couple of other questions like that, but I wanted to make sure that we blanket that because for those of you that are like, am I a fit? Yes or no? If you don't know the answer to that, that's part of why we did the call today, right? Is to have you hear and extrapolate from the things that Darren said that they're looking for characteristics wise, whether that's you or not. Are you curious? Do you like fast-paced projects? Are you willing to learn anything? Will you work on teams really well? Do you have analytic capability? Right? So like some of this stuff is not just what's in your resume. It's what you're gonna do with what you've done already.
Good stuff. Cool. We got a question as a direct question to me. I thought it was a good one. Uh, Darren, earlier in the convo, you mentioned you met with, I believe it was Jason, the CEO, being drawn to the vision and what Stax is working towards. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, kind of what specifically stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what he described was a lot of what, I described earlier in terms of what I liked about the company. I think, it was his vision for we want to create a flat organization. We want to create a community of at the local office level, and we basically want to be an employer of choice that people want to work at, that people enjoy going to work every day, and that is also delivering really good work for our clients. And it's not that complex of a formula, but I think executing on it can be difficult. And I think um, you know, almost getting in, I wouldn't call it the ground level, but above the ground level, and being able to help reinforce and forge that was really what compelled me.
Amazing. All right. Important question. This one is from me. Really, really important. I'll be in Chicago next week along with Jenny Ray. You mentioned Pequod as a pizza spot. Is that the spot, or are there any other places we definitely need to check out for some, you know, thin slice Chicago pizza?
It is it's the local secret. Pequod's is. So I would recommend that for sure. That's in Lincoln Park, and then there's another place on the south side called Vito and Nick's that also is that kind of tavern thin crust style that I really like. So those are my two favorites, I would say, in Chicago.
I
I
love
love
it.
it.
Darren, can I just close off the call by asking a question that I got privately in the chat, which is a really good one. Should people reach out to you? Should they reach out to somebody else internally if they're interested? What would you kind of provide as advice for the best next step for folks that are on the call today who have self-qualified and said, yeah, I think this is what I would be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to start that process is to reach out probably to our recruiting team, and introduce yourself that way. That's what they're doing day in and day out, and ensuring that people aren't getting lost in the shuffle and all that good stuff. And I think that's the best way to kind of formalize your candidacy. So generally speaking, I think that's probably the best first step.
Amazing. We'll make sure we include the relevant links and emails when we share the recording with everyone. Cool. All right, January. Well, I think we can land the plane.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Darren, for coming on. Stax is an incredibly impressive firm. We're so excited to be able to share a little bit more under the hood about what's happening. Your experience is fascinating. I grew up west of Philly too, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But we were kind of in between the Baltimore teams and the Philly teams, so I spent a lot of time and watching the Orioles.
Yeah.
I'm old enough that Cal Ripken was still playing when I was
Right.
growing up. But anyhow, it's fun to connect and hear your background. And now I'm gonna have to try the pizza. So other than the great things about Stacks, I feel like we got a lot out of this time together. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on.
Thank you.